No. Well, that was horrible, wasn't it? Welcome back to a very special Halloween edition of The Library is Open, my darlings. So I hope you brought your library card on pain of supernatural evil. Should really plan these sentences out first, shouldn't I? But hey ho. What time is it? It's the witching hour. Oh. That'd be better if I had a torch, wouldn't it? But you know what? You live, you learn. Hello, and a very warm welcome to this episode, this extra special episode, I should say, of The Library is Open, which is kind of a Halloween-y sort of special. So prepare to have your spines tingled and your gooses bumped and other such things like that. Hopefully that explains why I've got this weird sort of cobwebby kind of ruff on my neck, which seemed like a really good idea at the time, but I very much suspect that at some point it's going to make me sneeze. It was an impulse buy in Sainsbury's, which just goes to show you that going shopping when you're bored is not always a great idea. So there we go. I could probably double up as one of those judges' wigs actually, but hey ho. So yeah, in this edition I just thought, what with Halloween soon upon us, it might be nice to run through a couple of spoopy dooky books to give you some sort of themed seasonal reading. For the last 2 weeks or so I've been I'm not going to say I'm on a horror kick, because I'm not a huge fan of horror per se, but I've certainly been gravitating towards the more supernatural tales, or things with sort of gothic overtones and so on and so forth. And maybe that is something to do with the season, I don't know. And of course, when I'm filming this, the clocks have just gone forward in the UK for daylight saving time. Not quite sure why we still do that, but it is what it is. And so obviously the nights are drawing in, as my grandma would say. And there's nothing like a little sort of mini scare, is there, in a book to really make you feel in the mood for the season. Okay, so I've picked 5 contemporary novels for that would be pretty suitable for the Halloween season, and then one sort of old standby classic, which shock horror, bad behaviour. I haven't actually read, but I've owned for ages. Actually, not shock horror, because you can read whatever you want, as I always say. It's like nobody's obligated to read anything, but there we go. So these are kind of varied. The thing they have in common is they're all either 2019 or 2020 publications, I think. Yeah. And they are all in some way spooky in one form or another. So let's begin, shall we? So I've read some of these, and I'm halfway through others of them. There's 5, 23, 4... 4 physical copies, one that I read on ebook because it was like 99p, and times is hard. And then the classic is also a physical copy. But let's start, shall we? So this is one that I picked up on impulse from the Waterstones. Still got my bookmark in there because I've not long finished it. And this is called Pine, and it's by Francine Toon, which is a great name. So this is set in the Highlands of Scotland, and it's about a young girl called Lauren, although her real name is Oren, and her mother has disappeared, so she lives with her father, who's struggling with alcohol dependency issues and so on and so forth. And one night, it's Halloween actually when the book opens, and she's going trick-or-treating in this sort of small community. And this night when they're driving home, this woman stumbles out into the road, and her dad picks the woman up and takes her home, with no idea who it is. But the next morning, her dad has no idea, or rather no memory of this woman at all. Lauren's the only person who remembers. So she's sort of in this mixed up position of not really knowing what's going on, and she doesn't have a great home life. Not that her dad doesn't try, but he's having a really hard time of things, and she's having a dodgy time at school with people bullying her and so on and so forth. and she looks for answers in her tarot deck. We sort of discover that her mother was very spiritual, and so on and so forth. And then sort of strange occurrences start to happen in the neighbourhood of this village, some of which may be supernatural, some of which may be, you know, man-made, as it were, and it's just this really sort of chilling kind of mixture of otherworldly and earthly evil, and we're never quite sure where the joins are, but it's really nice. It is suitably chilling. I wouldn't say it was overly supernatural, but there are definite supernatural elements, and I think what Francine does really well is lets you make up your own mind about what the truth of the story is, not to give too much away. So this was, interestingly, it was shortlisted for the Bloody Scotland crime debut of the year, which is interesting because it is a crime novel as much as it does sort of count as like a spooky kind of fantasy novel, and I think she balances the two really, really well. So that's Pine, and I had a really good time reading it. It was a good time, and it's really beautifully designed. I mean, look at that. Gorgeous French flaps. Oh, that's just quotes. But I think it does something really nicely that sort of folklore storytelling does, which is sort of blur the two worlds, this world and, you know, whatever is in the beyond, and sort of leave you unsure of, as I say, where the joins are, which is, I think that's a really nice sort of kind of Halloween-y kind of vibe, particularly for those of you that may be more into crime than fantasy. So that's Pine. The second one, I really, really enjoyed this. I've just finished reading this, actually. And again, another beautiful cover. So this is called A Deadly Education, and it's by Naomi Novik, and it's subtitled Lesson 1 of the Scholomance. So for those of you who are, you know, would like a take on sort of wizardry and so on and so forth, or magic, and you don't want to put any more money into Joanne Rowling's back pocket, I count myself among those people, this is a really, really great proposition. This is a really adult kind of wizarding school world, so it's got that sort of dark academia kind of feel, where, you know, this is not a place of good, let's say. So it centres on our main character, Elle, or Galadriel to give her a full name, who is a magic practitioner. And she is a student, a junior student at the Scholomance, which is the sort of centre of magic education in the world. So basically people come from all around. It used to be that only people that were in enclaves, which are sort of groups of protected wizards and so on. They don't actually use the term wizard, I don't think. But they were collectives in like capital cities and so on and so forth. And then there were those, and they were sort of bound as like groups. And then there were independent children born who have the power to wield magic, which is in this world subdivided into mana, which is sort of good, positive magic, to oversimplify, and malia, which is evil and used by drawing energy from other living things. So, yeah, this school is very much not benevolent. It's plagued with demons, and there's a really horrible setup, actually, where it's sort of shaped like almost like an amphitheatre, I think. And then sort of like freshmen live on the top floor, sophomores, juniors and seniors live on the very bottom floor, and in the centre of the school is the graduation hall, which is where all the demons collect. They sort of like wiggle their way in because it's not protected properly. And then on graduation day, each year the floors rotate down until the students reach the bottom floor. And on graduation day, the walls disappear and the students are sent into the graduation hall with the expectancy that not very many of them will survive. There's a really dark quality to this novel where, like, children die, like, fairly regularly, a couple every chapter, and it's a very sort of eat or be eaten kind of world where alliances are made on what you can do for people or what they can do for you, as opposed to genuine friendship. Anyway, Galadriel is very annoyed to be saved several times from one of these demons. They sort of wiggle through the pipes and so on and so forth, and they're really, really quite nasty, you know. These are not sort of whimsical, mystical creatures. These are horrible demons, or demonic manifestations, as it were. And she's saved by a guy called Orion Lake, who is part of an enclave, the New York enclave. She is very much independent. She lives with her mum, who's like a sort of spiritualist healer in Wales, which I kind of love that detail. He sort of begins to affect the kind of balance at the school, because he starts to save lots of people from the demons, but obviously the school needs to maintain balance. Because the school kind of exists as its own entity, in the sense that, well, it doesn't necessarily have independent thought. It has a sense of, you know, that sort of yin and yang thing where things have to be balanced out. So it will withhold things from the students or gift them things, but it wants an exchange for that. So this thus begins a sort of breaking down of the established, you know, parameters of this world, and, you know, Galadriel and Orion have to sort of band together, or very unwillingly, to face what's coming next and try and save their own lives, you know. So yeah, I really, really liked this. I'm assuming this is going to be part of at least a trilogy, or maybe just a duology, I don't know. Because it sort of ends on a real cliffhanger where you're like, oh, did not see that coming. Which I suppose is the point of a cliffhanger, really, isn't it? But I'm probably doing it a disservice by the way I've described this, because it's so intricately plotted and the world is so vivid. And Galadriel is a wonderful narrator character. She's so caustic and, you know, very much not the simpering heroine. She's got, like, a backbone of deadly steel, that's exactly what I want to see in my protagonists. So yeah, if you're looking for a sort of wizardy education, wizardy education novel that really ticks those dark boxes, you could do a heck of a lot worse than check out A Deadly Education. Just buy it for the cover. Look at that. Beautiful. Beautiful. Lovely. Okay, so that's that. The next one is one I'm currently reading, actually. So I'm actually that far into it, but I think it's going to be a good one. This is called The Once and Future Witches by Alix E. Harrow. And if you've watched my channel before, you'll know that this is the author of The 10,000 Girls of January, which I talked about a while ago. I just have a sip of tea there, just because it's spooky season. There's no need to neglect your caffeine intake. Oh, actually, sidebar, I'm drinking, because sometimes people ask, I'm drinking the new Yorkshire Tea toast and jam tea bags, which are honestly amazing. I think they're exclusive to Asda, but if you can get some, totally worth it. Lovely. Well, apparently it's a breakfast tea and you're only supposed to drink it at breakfast, but I won't be told. I'll drink it all day if I like. So The Once and Future Witches is about three sisters who are living in New Salem, and so the year is it's the late 1800s, so 1893, and they're estranged, but then brought back together by a supernatural, it seems, event. As children, they were raised by their grandmother, who was a witch practitioner, and then they lived with their dad, who it sort of hinted, like I say, I haven't read this whole thing yet, it sort of hinted was, you know, not a good father, which seems to be a kind of a recurring theme. And two of the older sisters ran away, leaving the youngest sister to sort of fend for herself, and then we get the idea that she took quite drastic steps in order to remedy her situation. Anyway, they're reunited by this supernatural event, and I'll just read you a little bit of the blurb, because I think it kind of sums up where it's going. So it says, in 1893, there's no such thing as witches. There used to be. in the dark days before the burnings began. I'm assuming that's the Puritans and so on and so forth. But now witching is nothing but tidy charms and nursery rhymes. If the modern woman wants any measure of power, she must find it in the ballot box, which is really interesting because what she's started to do already in this novel is to sort of marry this idea about around witching and like female-centered power with the suffragette movement at the time, which I find really, really fascinating. And the end of this is basically saying the sisters, reunited, will need to delve into the oldest magics, draw new alliances, and heal the bond between them if they want to survive. And this is the best part, this is the best part. There's no such thing as witches, but there will be. And look at that. I mean, that's a chunkster, isn't it? But, again, beautifully designed. You know, books are just stunning, aren't they? You know what I mean? That's gorgeous. But, so I'm really interested in this. I'm really interested in the sort of, that sort of narrative around, you know, witchcraft and burning at the stake. And then, you know, onto the sort of parallels in the 50s with McCarthyism and so on and so forth, and the Communist Party. And I really like this marriage, as I say, with the suffragette movement and this sort of, you know, because oftentimes, like, particularly the patriarchy will put women down and sort, or in the past certainly did, and sort of try and draw parallels with the you know, witchcraft and evil, and sort of equate that with female power, which to sort of discourage it. And I kind of like the idea that they're re-examining that from the other side and sort of saying, what if female power can come from both the ballot box and the wand? The ballot box or the belladonna. Love that. Love that. So, yeah, I'm not that far through, but I think this is going to be great. And it looks like I'm going to be reading this on Halloween week itself. So, I feel like it's going to be slightly more gentle in some respects in terms of the overtly Halloween themes. But I think it's still going to be worth a peruse if you like your spooky kind of rooted in social engagement and feminism. So, and who doesn't want that, right? Lovely. Okay, next one, another beautiful one. This is stunning. Again, this is a Waterstone special edition, which I absolutely love. They're not paying me at all. I think they should, or at least send me free stuff. But they do these sort of special editions with like sprayed edges on the pages, and I absolutely love that. The best part, I will just say, is when they've been sprayed, sometimes the pages slightly stick together, and you've got to like prise them, and it makes the best noise. I know I'm weird. But I haven't read this one yet. But from what I understand, this is the sort of origin story of the Brides of Dracula. And I should tell you the title. It's called The Deathless Girls by Kiran, Millwood, Hargrave. And again, beautiful. Beautiful. I'll just read you a little bit of the blurb. So, on the eve of their divining day, 17-year-old Lil and her twin sister Kizzy are captured by the cruel Boyar Valkar. Forced to work as slaves, they're stripped of hope, power, and everything they've ever known, until Mira, a fellow captive, gives Lil someone to live for and someone to love. But when the sisters hear of the mythical dragon, more monster than man, I wonder if that's Dracula, maybe, who accepts girls as gifts, their desperate existence is threatened once more. So that sounds exciting, doesn't it? Smells great. And the sprayed edges, did I mention that? I am statistically more likely to buy a book if it's got sprayed edges, irrespective of the genre. I know that's a weird thing, but hey ho, this is who I am. Okay, so I will let you know how I get on with this, but I just think I think this counts as YA. But you know, I think we had a discussion in the comments of my previous video on Michelle Faber, where it's just like I won't say who it was in case they don't want to be identified, but we were talking about the weird, like, separation between YA and adult, and I just sort of think, I don't know if that needs to be a thing. Just read what you enjoy, you know, because I wonder if there's a sort of stigma attached to both genres, in the sense that people are less likely to gravitate towards certain things that they don't think are for them, whereas a story is a story is a story, you know. Just go with what you like. So yeah, not a lot to report, but I do think that sounds exciting for the Halloween season. Bit spooktacular, bit sort of questy, and also Dracula, you know, one of the classic tropes of Halloween. So there we go. The fifth book that is in my recommendations, I don't have a physical copy of because I read it on the ebook, and it's called Girls of Brackenhill by Kate Moretti, who I believe is, because it's the first one I've read of hers, is more of a thriller writer per se, but this one is sort of a thriller writer with potential supernatural elements, so I suppose closer to Pine than to the Deathless Girls. And this is about a woman called Hannah who, when she was younger, she and her sister, her older sister, used to stay at their aunt and uncle's house called Brackenhill, because they had quite a troubled childhood with their mother worked very hard, but she had this partner, Wes, who was, it is hinted quite heavily, that was sexually abusive to the sisters. So this was kind of like a respite place, this beautiful castle called Brackenhill. Anyway, one day her sister disappears, and everybody assumes that she's run away, and Hannah is sort of never manages to resolve these issues, and when she is much older, she comes back to Brackenhill when her aunt is killed. This is not a spoiler, by the way, you find out this really, really early on. And what she tries to do is to solve whether her aunt's death is in any way related to her sister's disappearance, but as she does so, she uncovers more truths about what really happened in the past and her own repressed memories, and whether the house itself has a strange kind of power over both her and the lives of the people in the community. So it's really, really interesting. It's sort of... I'm not going to say it's one of my top books of the year, because I don't think it is, but it was diverting, and I enjoyed it, and there were some really nicely placed revelations at points where you were like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And again, what she does, which is what Kate Moretti, does, which is what Francine Toon does, is sort of leave it to your imagination with regard to what actually happened. Like, she provides an explanation, but I suppose a bit like Poirot in Murder on the Orient Express, no spoilers, she sort of provides an explanation, and it's up to you whether you accept that explanation or you go with the other explanation. So there's quite a nice blur in there, which I quite like. I don't think having to completely understand the book is a prerequisite. It is quite spooky in terms of, not so much the supernatural elements, actually. The human elements of that book are much scarier, I think, in terms of there's a lot of foreboding and foreshadowing and a kind of palpable sense of human menace. And as I say, when you get to the end, you're really not sure what actually happened, because I don't think the characters are either, not completely. So that's quite nice. That feels quite... what would be the word? Feels quite... a brave move, really, you know, because we're conditioned as humans to expect neat wrap-ups, and she doesn't really give us that, which is really quite nice, so I enjoy that. Lovely. So the final book, I promised you a classic after those, you know, sort of 5 frightful novels. I promised you a classic, which I have, I admit, never read, and so this is the 6th, which makes this, I guess, the dirty half dozen. Deadly half dozen, that's better, isn't it? Dirty sounds like I'm flogging you soft porn, and I'm not doing that. So this is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which is, I got this free. I say free. I think one of the papers did it years ago. You had to like collect tokens or something like that, and you got like a set of books for free. But the weird thing about stuff like Frankenstein, I suppose in the same way stuff like Dracula as well, is that we all kind of know the stories even if we haven't read them, or we think we know the stories, because they've sort of transferred from their original forms to becoming just a part of our popular culture and our shared knowledge. Like if you say Frankenstein, everybody kind of knows what you mean, whether they fully get the story or not. Although one of my favourite things is where people say, where people call the monster Frankenstein, but obviously Frankenstein is the name of the doctor who made him, not the actual monster, which is really interesting. The National Theatre did a really good production a few years ago, say a few years, that could be any time in the last 10 years. With an adaptation by Lgbtqia of Frankenstein. That was excellent. And, you know, sort of countless films and so on and so forth have dealt with the Frankenstein story. But I've never actually read it. So, I think that this sort of blurb on the back really describes it really nicely, actually. It says, a twisted upside-down creation myth. Now, I kind of love that, because I've been doing creation myths a lot of work lately with my students. Sort of like, you know, the different cultures' approaches to, like, birth, regeneration, rebirth, and so on and so forth. And it says, Mary Shelley's chilling gothic tale lays bare the dark side of science and the horror within us all. So I think it would be, if I can time this in, this would be so good to start on Halloween Eve and just see how far I get, and maybe have the day of Halloween to just read it. I feel like that would be really quite nice, actually. So that would be that. Lovely. So yeah, those are my, as I say, my deadly half dozen. So 5 new contemporaries across quite a wide range of genres in some respects, and sort of age ranges, whatever that means. So hopefully there's something there that piques your interest. Yeah, what do you read to get yourself in the spooky mood? Are you a horror junkie, or do you prefer the sort of horror sci-fi, or, you know, horror realism, or maybe just a thriller? I think they all count. Whatever bumps your gooses, as I say. So that's what I should be reading in the spooky season. Yeah. Interesting time of year, isn't it? Halloween. It's like, I've never been really that big on it, to be honest. I've been practically disowned this week for admitting that I've only seen Hocus Pocus once. I must be missing that part of the queer gene that forces you to watch it like multiple times, but I've only seen it once. That was alright. I preferred Caffeine and Jimmy and Sister Act, if I'm honest. That says a lot about my personality, doesn't it? But I have been making the effort. So another thing I've done with my students this week is do some work on Edgar Allan Poe, sort of translating some of his terrifying poems into performance work, and also some stuff by Lewis Carroll, so like Jabberwocky and so on and so forth, monsters and mayhem and that. So I'm doing my best. I'm doing my absolute best to try and get into the spooky season, because goodness knows we need something to distract us this year, don't we? Anyway, sound off in the comments below. What are you doing for Halloween? Do you bother? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you make any special effort? Drop your movies as well. Maybe I'll watch some spooky movies. I have a soft spot for Halloween Town, which is a Disney Channel original, and featuring Debbie Reynolds. And, you know, and just anything special you're doing this year. Would be lovely to hear about. But for now, the spine-tingling library is closed. That's not okay, is it? That's really not okay. Like I've been used and abused by an alien life form. Well, it's not entirely inaccurate. Sorry. Right, I'll stop. So put your library cards somewhere safe, and keep those chains rattling. Ooh. I will see you next time. In the meantime, stay safe and try not to let the bed bugs bite. Lots of love. Take care. Mwah.